to set up the layout of a business site using the spaces and pages concept. In one of the previous videos, as part of this tutorial series, we had explored the topic of groups in depth, and we had learned that groups are a way to control the layout of your business site. In that video, we had a bunch of applications that were hosted in the Cloud Foundry environment of the BTP. The HTML5 repository of the sub account was my content provider, and these applications were then imported from my content provider into the Build Work Zone using the Content Explorer. Then using the Content Manager, I had set up some custom groups and roles. The imported apps were then assigned to groups as well as to the roles. And finally, I had assigned the role to my user ID. We had also learned the important difference that roles control access and groups control the layout. After all the groups and roles had been set up, we learned that in the site settings, there is a parameter that has to be maintained, and that is the viewing mode. And we had chosen the groups viewing mode. There is another viewing mode, which is the spaces and pages new experience. And this is going to be the focus of our video this time. We are going to see how to set up spaces and pages in your business site. Now, the best way to understand spaces and pages is to look at it in comparison with groups. So let's quickly look at the difference between the setup of groups versus the setup of spaces and pages. In the groups viewing mode, we have applications. Applications are assigned to roles, and then roles are assigned to business sites. Now this defines which roles are relevant for which business site. One or more roles are thereafter assigned to users, and this defines which user gets to see which applications. And finally, apps are also assigned to groups, which controls the layout. All the applications in one particular group appear together. Now let's come to the spaces and pages. In the spaces and pages new experience viewing mode, we will of course be using the very same applications, and these apps are going to be assigned to roles, and roles will be assigned to business site just like in the groups. And finally, one or more roles are also assigned to users, which define which user gets to see which application. So this part here, this downside, the authorization part of spaces and pages behaves in exactly the same way as it does in the groups viewing mode. What is different is going to be the layout. Here, we will be setting up spaces, and within a space, we will have pages. Within each page, we have a section. And then finally, within a section, we assign the applications. The space is also going to be assigned to a role. So in the groups viewing mode, we had assigned applications into groups, and that had created our layout. So we do not have like a further level of classification. In the spaces and pages viewing mode, we will be assigning apps within sections and sections within pages and pages within spaces. So you can already tell a big difference here in spaces and pages is that you get more classification levels to set up a layout that closely matches your business process setup. Okay, so let's now look at the steps involved in the spaces and pages setup. Now, many of these steps we had already done in the previous video on the groups layout. They are common for both, and we will not be repeating them here. In case you wish to see how they have been done, I would strongly recommend you to first have a look at the previous video. I've dropped a link for that in the description box below. So the first step, we have to identify our content provider. In our case, this is going to be the HTML5 repository. Second step, add the applications into your content manager using the Content Explorer. Third step, set up the roles that we will be needing. Fourth step, assign the application to the roles. Fifth step, assign the roles to our business site. Now, these are the steps that have already been done. The next step, we are going to be creating two spaces, one for all the procurement related applications called as external procurement, and another space for the goods movement application called as goods movement. So let's create these two spaces in the Build Work Zone. Let's go to the Content Manager and then click on Create, select Space, provide the name for the space and click on Save. So that's it. It's quite straightforward. In a very similar fashion, let's go ahead and create the second space as well. So once the spaces have been set up, the next thing we're going to look at is the setup of the pages and sections. Now under the external procurement space, if you see, there are a number of applications here that are related to the data management. So I'm going to create one page for data management. And from the slide earlier, we had seen that if needed, pages can be further divided into sections. So under the data management tab, I'll create one section for the vendor related applications, one section for the source management related apps, and then finally a third section for the material management related applications. So this is going to be my first page under this particular space. Then in the same space, I'll have another page called as order processing. Here I don't want a further classification, so I'll just create one section called as purchase. So now let's set up the pages and sections. Let's go to the content manager, click on create, select page, specify the name of the first page. Within this page, we have the first section called as the vendor. Then we have a second section called as the source management. And finally, we have a third section called as the material management. Let's save the first page. Now you can see the page has been created. And under that particular page, you have the three sections that you had specified: vendor, source management, and material management. Similarly, create the second page called as order processing. And within this page, we just have a single section called as purchase. Let's save this. Let's create the third page called as movements and add the single section in it called as the external procurement. Let's save. So now that completes the setup of my three pages that I have, which are the data management, order processing, and movement. So now what have we done? We have the spaces created here, and then we have the pages and the sections within the pages created over here. But we have not really linked the two. So that's going to be our next step. We are going to link the spaces with the pages. So for this, let's select the first space, which was external procurement. Let's go in the edit mode and then click all the pages that you want to assign to this particular space. And they are going to be the data management page and the page for the order processing. This particular page movements is for the goods movement space, and so we do not assign it over here. So let's click on save. You can see these two pages have been assigned to the space. In a very similar fashion, assign the pages to the other space, goods movement. Let's go in the edit mode and then select the page movements and then click on save. So this is how you would assign a page to a particular space. The next thing that we are going to do is to assign the applications in the relevant sections that we have just set up. I'll show it to you for one section. So under the space external procurement, we have the page called as data management. And here we have the section called as vendor. This section contains the apps for create, change, display vendor, and also block and unblock. So let's do this in the content manager. Let's go to the page called as data management. And within this particular page, you have the section called as vendor. Now we can use the add widget button, select tiles, and then select the apps that we want to add. So block vendor, change vendor, create vendor, display vendor, and unblock vendor as well. So there, and then we click on add and we save everything. So this would add the applications under the particular section on a page. In a very similar fashion, add the other applications to the different sections. And at the end, the data management page would look something like this. The order processing page would look something like this. And the movements page would look something like this. The next thing that we are going to do is to assign the spaces to the roles. Let's just quickly have a look at our target picture. If you see here carefully, you notice that the senior purchaser role, it needs access only to those particular applications that are effectively in the external procurement space. All right. So this means that the only space that we are going to assign to the senior purchaser role is the external procurement. So let's do this in the content manager. Let's go to the senior purchaser role, which was created in the last video. Go to the edit mode, and then under spaces, let's select external procurement space. So we are assigning the external procurement space to the senior purchaser role like this. A quick look at the target picture again. This time, let's focus on the goods movement manager role. The goods movement manager needs access to applications from both the spaces. So we will be assigning both of these spaces to the goods movement manager role. So let's do this in content manager. We go to the goods movement manager, edit, go to spaces, and then assign both of these pages to this particular space, and then click on save. The last thing for us to do here is that we go back to the site directory, and then under the site settings, let's go in the edit mode and choose the viewing mode as spaces and pages new experience. This will allow us to test the entire spaces and pages setup that we have just done. So now let's try to test everything out. So here you see the name of the space, external procurement, and within this space we have the two pages, master data and order processing. And then within master data, for example, you have then the individual sections, source management, vendor, and then within each of the sections you have the different applications assigned. So this is how the layout of your business site can be built by using spaces, pages, sections, and apps within the section itself. So let's try to now answer a few questions. When I was creating the page master data, I had a third section called as the material management. But if you see, I don't see that section over here at all. Now, why is that? This is because at the moment, I only have the role of senior purchaser assigned to my user ID in the BTP sub account. And this particular role has access only to the apps within these two sections. It does not have access to any application from material management. Therefore, this particular section is not shown to us at all. Next question. Why do I only see one space called as external procurement over here, although we had created two spaces? Now, this is because when we were assigning the spaces to the roles, for the senior purchaser role, we had assigned the space external procurement only. We had not assigned the second space. That is why you just see one space over here. So now let me assign a second role to my user ID in the sub account. And this time it's going to be the goods movement manager. So I'll try reloading my business site. Now you can see there are two spaces that are appearing within the business site. The next question, under the section called as vendor, if you recall, we had the applications create vendor, change vendor, display vendor, and block and unblock vendor. But at the moment, I don't see the create vendor and the change vendor over here. Now, why does this happen? This is because these apps have not been assigned either to the senior purchaser role or to the goods movement manager role. And those are the only two roles that I have. And I only see the apps that have been explicitly assigned to the roles that have been assigned to me. And this is the reason why you don't see the change vendor and the create vendor apps under the section vendor. So I hope now the concept of spaces and pages and how they can be used to control the layout of your business site is clear to you. As always, it's best if you try this out on your own by following this particular example. If you found the content of this video useful, please do consider subscribing to the channel or dropping a like for this video. In the next video, we will be looking at some other interesting topic about the SAP Build Work Zone. So until then, take care and goodbye.